Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by Carbonite. Sign up for Carbonite and use the promo code TWiST to receive your special offer. And by MailChimp. Manage lists with up to 2,000 subscribers and send up to 12,000 emails per month for free with MailChimp.
Today on our news roundtable, Dr. Paul Kedrosky is with us, finally, yes! And William Quigley of Clearstone Venture Partners is here. Tyler will give us some amazing insights. He gave me a little preview of a couple. He's got them stacked up. Lon Harris as well, the content director from Ranker Danker. All that and more right now.
That's what it's all about, man. They said, money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah, money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah, we ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
Hey everybody, we've got what the heck is going on with this collar over here? Jesus, nobody even tells me. Hey everybody, we've got a great program for you today. Paul Kedrosky is on the program. William Quigley is on the program. Of course, Lon Harris is here to read the news. And Tyler Crowley is remote from Bangladesh, of all places, to give his wonderful, wonderful insights. And if you would like to give us some insights, join the TWiST List Producers Program. What is it? It's an email list. It's a private email list with about 125 people on it. These are the top fans of the show. And in order to keep the signal-to-noise ratio correct, we charge $1, $2 a month to join the list. Or you can become a producer and pay as much as $100 or $200 a month if you really get value from the program. What does this do? It gives you a whole swath of benefits, like getting to suggest people to be on the program, produce a program, help with the Q&A, all these amazing things. But the truth be told, what it is you're paying for access and to be part of a private small community that talks about startup companies, Tyler Crowley's life, Lon Harris's life.
Non-stop.
Non-stop. It's just non-stop.
7 days a week.
If you're obsessive about This Week in Startups, just join twistlist.co. And hey, there's 3 new levels: Super Fan $10 a month, Fan $5 a month, and Broke Ass Fan for $2 a month. Twistlist.co. And boy, do we have a lot of news today, and including talking about the Motorola purchase, Ashton Kutcher's non-disclosures of all his angel investments, HP, tons of stuff going on. But I wanted to take a moment to tell you about a product and service that I use weekly. It's called MailChimp. That's it. That's the commercial. We're done. It's the greatest product ever. Everybody uses it. And the free plan is always free. 2,000 subscribers, 12,000 emails per month, free. And they have a Social Pro feature that now syncs and lets you segment your list by cloud score. I love that. It works really well for me, actually. I took it during the launch conference, and I took the top 200 people, and I sent them, hey, come to the launch conference as my guest. Then I took the next 500 people, and I gave them a 50% discount. Then I took the next 1,000 people, and I gave them a 40% discount. I said, you know what? Let me try this tiered thing where I can take the cloud score through MailChimp and email my people, and it really worked. MailChimp has tons of cool tricks and tips, and you're going to want to check out their API. Oh, wow, here's an interesting feature. They have a new subject line suggester. You enter words or phrases that you're planning to use in your subject line. MailChimp compares them to all lines ever used in the system, their resulting open rates, and then tells you how they performed. Wow, that is a clever idea. Hey, there's no contract, there's no trial, and the free plan is always free. Let's get to the news. Thank you, MailChimp.
Let's do it. So top story, highest votes, biggest story of the week, the one we got to talk about first. On Monday, Google announced it was acquiring Motorola Mobility for approximately $40 a share, or $12.5 billion cash. The price represents a premium of 63% versus the closing price of Motorola Mobility shares the previous Friday. This will come out of its thought, Google's estimated $39 billion cash on hand. Google has insisted that Android will remain an open platform. It will run Motorola Mobility as a side business. Co-founder and CEO Larry Page explained the deal is centering not only on Motorola's development of Android smartphones and devices, but also its role as a market leader in home devices and video solutions. Many pundits suggested the company's estimated 14,600 patents and 6,700 pending patent applications may also have something to do with it. So why Motorola? Why now? What do you think? Or is there a reason I didn't mention for this deal? And is it just ammo?
I would like to hear Dr. Paul Kedrosky's opinion. Doctor, are you there?
this was all, I mean, to my mind, this was all about the patents, obviously. I mean, we're in the middle of this, a kind of almost 1999-esque patent frenzy in the sense that, we're literally valuing companies on a per patent basis, the same way in 1999 we were valuing companies on a per engineer basis. So the only way to even begin to try to rationalize the price that Google paid for MMI for Motorola is on a per patent basis, and on that basis, it was less than the winning Nortel bid for the portfolio of Nortel patents that recently went out. So, on that basis, it was arguably somewhat cheaper. But I mean, this all goes to the core of the story, though, really is why all of a sudden we're bidding up so much for patents. And the answer to that is because the U.S. Patent Office is a complete, can I say this? Cluster. I mean, it's a disaster.
You can say it, but you just cost yourself a little bit of money. $10 into the storage jar. It is a cluster F, yes.
Right, it's a cluster F. And so, that's what's going on here. And I mean, and everything else is a distraction and an ex-post explanation. The hardware, the home video stuff, the server technology, none of that stuff lasts 10 minutes past the deal closing. This is all about patents.
Interesting, I've never heard anybody say a price per patent, but at $12.5 billion, about 20,000 patents, let's call it. That's $625,000 per patent. William, what do you think?
Well, what I think is, first of all, Motorola has been known. My companies have been sued many times by Motorola, unfortunately. Motorola is, of all of the companies out there, they're the most aggressive in defending their patents. And they go a step further. You've heard of this concept of patent trolls. These are the guys who acquire patents, but they're more like lawyers. They don't have an operating business.
Right.
That has been a complete red herring. That's never been a real problem. The real problem in America have been the real patent trolls like Motorola. So what they do is they outsource to people, to lawyers, bands of lawyers, and they say, we're not going to pay you to sue on our behalf. But if you go out and you sue someone, you get 30-40% of the proceeds. So my companies have been sued by these jackals.
So what you're saying is they have hired essentially hitmen and said, the more you decapitate, kill, and maim in the industry, the more money you're going to make.
Yes.
It's like an open hit. Like, go find somebody to kill, and you get 40% of whatever they have.
Yes, and here's what I really
I've never heard this before.
It's I mean, we just paid $7.2 million to Motorola in July. All right, to one of these scumbags. And the reason I dislike them so much, and I hope, by the way, this is why I'm such a fan of this acquisition, because I think Google's going to have a different approach. I don't think Google cares, frankly, if it gets a few $million by making everybody hate them. No. The lawyers obviously that Motorola hired didn't care. But what really annoyed me about this, and they've sued many of our companies, is that trying to say to these lawyers that here's a patent, and by the way, we've looked at yours, and there's no overlap at all. Right. They understand that, and they don't care. They're like, we understand that, but we're still going to take you through court, and it's going to be $5 or $6 million, so just settle with us.
And 3 years of your life.
Yeah, and all of your IT people, your CTO is locked up in all the discovery. Yeah. So for me, this was a hallelujah, because maybe
so you take
we'll
one
change
patent
this.
troll.
The worst of all.
The worst of all.
Yeah, and that's nice. And why, by the way, are patents in wireless so much more valuable, and they are, than other patents? It's because wireless, RF, the radio frequency spectrum, is really, really difficult to find innovative technology leaps. And there's not a lot of guys in the wireless space. Right. So finding high quality wireless engineers, very, very difficult. The patents, therefore, are worth a lot. So I think, I don't know how Google's going to work. They may want to set themselves up to defend things like people suing them over Android.
Right.
And I don't know if you know how Intel over the years has worked, but what they do is, if somebody sues Intel, Intel goes into their pockets of thousands of patents and says,
and they look,
oh, well, we'll sue you, and then you get a cross-licensing deal. So my guess is that's what this is about.
Right. This is like, okay, you have nuclear bombs on New York and Los Angeles. We have them on Paris and Cannes and Bordeaux.
Right.
Who would like to hit the button first? Or shall we just say that we don't point the nukes at these cities anymore? Paul, do you think we're going to see a time when the top 5 or 6 companies come to some resolution outside of, say, the legal system and say, listen, for the good of the industry, let's take this swath of features and make those non-patentable, or give a group license and just sort of a full-on arms treaty? Because right now, who's the loser in all this? It's all the startups and the young innovators. So these big companies can either destroy the entire industry and kill every child in the industry, and then it's only old big companies, or they could do this mitzvah of sorts and just say, hey, we're taking all these contentious issues and we're going to say these things are open for anybody to innovate on top of. Is that what Larry Page is going to do?
I doubt it.
Okay.
I mean, that'd be nice. I mean, I'd like it. But you know what the history of this stuff is the old story about smoke-filled rooms and property owners, right? They don't get together to do anything other than do ill to the rest of us. So the history of patent pools, which is really what you're talking about, is the history of large organizations banding together to create usurious terms to keep other people out of the marketplace and protect their own position. So, they may have the best of intentions. It's just, in practice, doing anything that democratizes all of this stuff, the system's set up in a way such that that's very, very difficult to do. And as a matter of fact, all the incentives really urge you to do the opposite. So, my bet is no. As much as to Larry's credit, maybe that's exactly what he wants to do. You look at the history of sort of the DVD industry, look at the history of predecessor consumer technologies. It's always been thus, and it will always be thus until we fix the thing that's really broken, which is that. And this is back to the other comment about the patentability of wireless technologies. We just make it too easy to patent things that were never intended to be patented, and as a result, we get held up for ransom.
Is there anything in this deal other than the patents? So when we strip away the patents, Larry Page has said he wants to, get more employees. Obviously, there are more engineers. I mean, and so it's strictly patents. There's nothing else in the portfolio. They don't want to build a soup to nuts hardware services infrastructure like Apple has and has dominated the market.
We don't know, but clearly Motorola has some stellar engineers.
Yeah.
And RF engineers are really, really good and hard to find. So whether or not they'll be able to keep them, who knows? But Motorola, especially where these engineers are located, they probably like the idea of working for Google.
Certainly the free food. I mean, right now they have a paid cafeteria, and also they get paid a third less on average than Google engineers. And owning Google stock versus owning Motorola stock options, clearly you would choose the Google.
Probably.
Yeah, but they may like it, but as a Google shareholder, I hate it. I mean, you're growing my headcount by 30%. You're adding a bunch of expensive engineers doing a hardware that's arguably antithetical to the whole Android business model. And look at what's happened to Google's share price this week. I mean, not surprisingly, it's actually fallen faster than its peers have in the face of a declining market and given this acquisition because it looks confused. It looks like a jumble. It looks like it's actually, in some ways, cannibalizing their own Android. I find the whole thing.
Will they just spin out this hardware business and just say, hey, HTC?
Boom,
or hey,
gone. Right.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah.
But let's put it another way. This is 4 months of cash flow for Google.
Right.
Who cares?
Who cares?
Yeah, but it's not about the cash flow though. And so I think the bigger distraction as a public company is this giant lump of headcount that they're adding. That's the thing. Is this we all know these kinds of acquisitions, M&As, whether hostile or are a mess at the best of times, and this is a giant one from a headcount standpoint. 30%.
It is, but you know what I would tell you? So far, the market hasn't cared. 93% of Google's revenues are advertising.
Right.
And yet they have thousands of projects going on that are consuming tons of time.
Well, there is the Henry Blodgett argument of, hey, Google just stripped down the company. Google could run its core business right now with 1/3 of its current employee base.
That's right.
So they could be massively profitable.
Yes.
Instead, Larry Page, who I had a conversation with at one point, and we were just talking about stuff, and my sense from him is that he is a legacy guy. He wants to change the world.
Yes.
He has, and now he wants to change it more. I think he's addicted to changing the world, and I think that's the difference.
Google,
and that's, but you know what? So does Steve Jobs. So I think it's a long-term buy, but in the short term, it means you're gonna take those earnings and they're gonna be pumped into R&D. Might they say, what are the possible collaborations we could see a year from now, 2 years from now? Might we see that when you buy something on Google Apps, like a Google Apps for your company, you get 10 phones with it that are $99 or included in the price? Might we see all these set-top boxes running Google TV? What are the possibilities on a product basis?
Oh,
I hate all of those ideas.
I must say I do too.
Really?
Well, because it's not. I mean, the main profit engine of the company is this, digital advertising business.
Yeah.
That's the main focus. I think as soon as they get away into the consumer market, they tried it right with Nexus, it didn't work. I think fundamentally Google is a hardcore engineering company.
Right.
They are not a consumer company. And so, they've got all of the the brilliance of Google comes around having a way to scour the web.
Maybe not traditionally, but now you have YouTube, clearly consumer-facing, Google Plus, consumer-facing. I mean, they do have a Gmail consumer-facing, so they do have 3 or 4 hits in the consumer space.
True. Well, let's be sure, be clear about that, though. That's why I'm saying you've got tons of activities, but that represents around 8% of their revenues.
Right.
Right?
But those things moat off people from infringing on it. So Google Chrome keeps a browser company like Microsoft from getting market share.
Yeah.
It's almost like all of these things are meant to just disrupt the marketplace. I mean, Android clearly was meant to kneecap Apple so that Apple and people going to apps would not affect the search business. Correct, Paul?
No, there's no question. That's exactly what was supposed to happen. I just think that what happened here was, Google got surprised by how quickly prices went up for the Nortel patent pool. Then Icon got aggressive with Motorola 3 weeks ago and said, we got to get this patent. I want to get this MMI patent thing sold. Look at the price that Nortel got for its patents. It went out and started shopping it. Microsoft made an early bid. Looked like it was going to take MMI off for patents. Google did what Google does, which is it waved a giant pool of cash at it and took it out at a price that Microsoft wouldn't pay. And the rest of us are left wandering around saying, gee, I wonder what they're going to do with the hardware. All they got forced to overbid in a competitive situation. They threw their cash in, and they're going to dump the hardware as fast as they can.
Next story.
All right, well, we got another huge juggernaut story, but we'll do something fun in the interim. A Russian company called Orbital Technologies has announced plans to launch a commercial space station that would serve as an orbiting hotel. Guests can book a trip up to the station in a Russian Soyuz spacecraft. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that wrong. Plus 5 luxurious days in one of 4 cabins on board the space station, which will orbit 217 miles above the Earth. The hotel will travel at 17,500 miles per hour. It'll also feature gourmet food, your choice of vertical or horizontal bedding accommodations, portals for taking in the view, and even working showers, outdoor activities likely unavailable, and no alcohol on board.
No alcohol?
The company is claiming that they can offer a 4-day package with the space travel included for $1 million, which sounds like a lot more reasonable sum than most of the other estimates for putting space tourists in orbit.
There is no way to do that for $1 million because didn't who was the guy Simone? Who's the guy from Microsoft who paid $50 million?
Yeah, Simone.
Yeah, and then he paid $25 million. It seems like it's get cut. You know what? This is a way for rich people to kill themselves. That's what this is. This is it's called toxic wealth.
Anybody bid up to stay in a Russian hotel, let alone one that didn't have alcohol?
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of
the previous estimates I had read were $51 million. They were saying to launch somebody into space, put them into orbit, and then bring them back.
This is
seems a little pie in the sky.
We have a term for this in the industry. It's called toxic wealth, and it's when somebody makes enough money and they're bored enough that they kill themselves. So I was talking to a billionaire recently, and he told me that he has been getting really into jumping out of planes with the parachutes.
Right.
I said, that's interesting.
That's not that outrageous.
No, I said that. He says, and so now I'm trying to figure out if I can slow my G6 down to a speed at which I could jump out of my G6.
Okay.
And I said, wait a second. I said, isn't jumping out of planes you have to go really slow? He goes, yeah, well, you can slow the jet down to this amount, and it's been done supposedly by the CIA or the Mossad or whatever.
Bruce Wayne figured it out.
And I'm like, are you? I said, don't you have kids now? He said, yeah, I got kids. I said, are you stupid? And he like, billionaires are not used to people. I said, are you stupid? I said, you are lucky enough to have a plane and you want to jump out of it? Most people are trying to get into private planes. You want to jump out of it? He's like, well, landing on some of these runways and it'd be more fun. I'm like, you're going to die, and then your kids are going to wonder what Dad was like and why Dad would do something as stupid as jumping out of a G6. Hello.
Maybe.
Toxic wealth.
Yeah.
So space tourism, you think we're going to have space tourism as a regular thing before the end of the decade?
We'll have it, but you know what? This is not it's not an industry that's even worth spending 2 seconds on from a business standpoint.
No, it's a business here.
Yeah, there's no business here. It's a cool thing for people to do who have lots of money and don't really have much else to spend on.
They want to spend more than it would cost to get Elton John to their garden party.
Exactly.
Bring Elton John with them to the space hotel. Now you've got something.
Let me just tell you. What I told this person was, I said to them, I said, have you ever heard of Eagle Computer? And surprisingly, this person had not heard of Eagle Computer. Have anybody here heard of Eagle Computer?
I haven't.
Have you heard of Paul, Eagle Computer?
Isn't that the old K-Pro thing?
Anyway, On June 8th, 1983, the day of Eagle's initial public offering, you can pull up my laptop here, gentlemen, its president, Dennis Barnhart, was killed in a crash of his new Ferrari.
Oh, I remember that.
He had just taken a yacht salesman to lunch. There was a succession plan in place that resulted in the assumption of the CEO, blah, 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 blah. That is called...
Do you know,
that was the first case of toxic wealth.
This still remember that.
This was the HP of its time, Eagle Computer. Yep. I remember swooning over Eagle Computers, and every rich person needs to read the story of Dennis Barnhart, who was killed the day of its initial public offering because he didn't know he couldn't spend the money fast enough that he bought a Ferrari and flipped it and killed himself.
But you don't coming from lunch with a yacht salesman too.
What you may not remember, I remember this story. I was in the Bay Area at the time, and the big headline was in the Oakland Tribune:
Schmuck,
$10 million millionaire. So after that IPO, days have changed. He was worth $10 million.
Yeah, he was worth $10 million, and he couldn't spend it fast enough. And I remember reading, I think he flipped the Ferrari with his lawyer in it, so I think he took out his lawyer as well. Anyway, toxic wealth. Next story.
So it's been a huge week for HP news. I'll try to get through all of it. Currently the world's largest maker of personal computers, but nevertheless, Bloomberg is reporting that they are spinning off their PC division. The division did $41 billion in business last year and earned $2 billion. HP CEO Leo Apotheker said during Thursday's earnings call they were going to continue to execute in this. Continuing to execute in this market is no longer in the interest of HP and its shareholders. And other HP news rumored that the company is close to purchasing British data analysis company Autonomy for $10 billion. And finally, HP announced it would discontinue operations for WebOS devices, specifically the touchpad and WebOS phones. Leaves the future of the platform totally in doubt. HP, of course, acquired WebOS as part of a $1.2 billion takeover of Palm last year. It's been troubled and not selling well ever since. So what do you make of the news? Does it make sense for HP to exit the PC business, including the tablet market, and what's the future here?
Paul, good idea to shut down a $40 billion business with $2 billion in revenue? Earnings?
Well, sure, but don't do it the way HP does it. I mean, listen, there's no question there was a complete screw up in terms of how they brought WebOS to market, the tablet product. How much? I mean, look at that. Was it something like 100,000 units of the HP tablet product that Best Buy had to take back, which was really what drove the earnings hit on HP's numbers last night?
I actually have these numbers. Best Buy.
Go ahead.
Best Buy took delivery of 270,000 touchpads and managed to sell 25,000, less than 10% of their inventory.
Yeah. So I don't think that's got to be the biggest, non-brick in a box recall of technology products in modern history. I mean, I've never seen anything quite like it. So it was a complete screw up on HP's forecasting, complete screw up on Best Buy's forecasting, but it speaks to fundamentally the brokenness of what HP's doing, this complete inability to have any sense at all of what the market's looking for from HP. So, like IBM before, there seems to be a proud path of following. Once you reach these moments where you find out, I'm just not there anymore, and I don't know what customers want, you retreat to software and services, which IBM did successfully 2 decades ago, and HP looks like it's walking down the same path. The mistake, however, here is that this was handled, Marx Brothers crazy style last night, or 2 nights ago, I guess, that what's it taken off the stock now? Something like 25% of the stock value. I mean, people could have been slapped upside the head.
Why wouldn't you set up a buyer for the PC business?
Sure.
And then say, hey, Lenvio or Dell now own this business. We now own 25% of Dell. And Dell's an awesome business. Why wouldn't they set that up ahead of time?
So I'll tell you one reason why.
Set up the Autonomy buy beforehand. Both sides.
What's happening to Dell's business? I know people in the Dell consumer business. They're all fired.
Right.
Dell's consumer business is gone.
Right.
So Dell's not going to buy it.
Right.
There is no one to buy this. The Chinese have done a terrific job of creating $300 computers. There's a business there probably if you were innovative, if you were creative, but in the current casting that is the HP PC business, it's super unattractive. Way too much effort, way too much balance sheet risk.
So it's an attention thing more than it is reality of it's a bad business. Any business that makes $2 billion a year in profit, wouldn't you say, hey, we make that $2 billion in profit, let's invest that in the services business?
Yeah, but when you think
or this gives us a foothold on everybody's desk with our logo.
HP's a $100 billion business, so call it 40% of their business is consumed by this awful, awful business, and it is, right? It's massively difficult to manage the supply chain here. And that $2 billion could go $2 billion negative in 6 months. They're barely hanging on. And keep in mind, all their projections are that the PC era is going away. They just don't have they just don't have the creativity to figure out what to do next in the space.
Does this just mean that Steve Jobs has kicked everybody's ass so brilliantly that nobody, including the number 1 manufacturer of PCs, feels they can compete? Like, they're the number 1 manufacturer, correct?
They're currently the world's largest maker of personal computers.
So they make a magnitude more computers than Steve Jobs does.
They must.
But
right?
you see,
and they still don't think they can compete. And it's a profitable business.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about laying down. That would be like the Dallas Mavericks saying, we won the ring, but next year we don't think that we can compete with LeBron and Wade, so we would like to give our ring back and we're going to fold our franchise.
or it would be like,
We're going to trade all of our players.
or it would be like RCA saying we're getting out of the television business, which is what they did because they couldn't figure out a way to
How'd that
make
work
money.
out for them?
RCA.
More like IBM on the PCs. I mean,
Well, IBM did work for them.
I mean, if
Was
you
IBM number 1 in PCs at that time? It probably was. Right?
It almost certainly was. I mean, Compaq was a little player. Packard Bell was little. Dell was all business. I think it's kind of a sad commentary that you can't figure out how to shift a business that big into something good, but the lack of originality in big American businesses.
What I don't understand, though, is if you have a business that is so huge, that is profitable, why can't you hire the 10 best designers in the world to make a sexy product that in some way competes with Apple's when Apple is charging double or the Apple premium's got to be 30 or 40% on a PC, right? So they're charging 40% more and you still can't cover the gap? You could charge 20, 10, 20, 30, 40% less than Apple.
But PCs...
And people still don't want the product.
How much of the PC is in their control? Because the operating system makes up a huge part of the experience of the machine.
And look at whether or not the accounting for this is hard to figure out. Whether or not they're making $2 billion is a question all in itself because there's so much internal cost allocation. It's possible from their standpoint they're not making any money. And I guarantee you from a management time standpoint,
Yeah, it's a time suck.
for a business that the market is saying we will value this at 0.2 times revenues.
Right.
So they're like, all right, we're getting no value for this. It's taking all of our time. Now, you're right. If somebody could figure out a way to shift it.
All right, when we get back, let's talk about Ashton Kutcher.
We have to.
Because that's pretty funny.
We must.
And
great.
hey, some good Foursquare stuff happening, and Evernote as well, 2 of our favorite companies. Let me take a moment to tell you about backing up your computer. Carbonite. It's all right. Start using it tonight. Securely and automatically back up your files. Plans start at $229 a year. And hey, we have a contest. Ding, 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 ding. Sign up your business for Carbonite, $229 a year. And you get the first 30 days for free if you use the promo code TWiST, TWiST. Then you email your receipt to contest@thisweekend.com and you'll be entered into a drawing for a free MacBook Air. That's an awesome contest. And by the way, if you wind up canceling afterwards, you can still join the contest. Carbonite's so proud of their service and so confident that you will continue, that they're going to give you the first 30 days for free. So sign up, give it a try, free. If you don't like it, the day after you send me your receipt, you can cancel. You're still entered into the contest. That's how secure Carbonite is in their product. I use it. Tyler is now using it after you lost your content, you lost your computer.
Hard drives go bad. Who knew? And then I find out.
No!
Who knew?
I've
No.
been telling you.
I know.
How
So
long have I told you?
it was an Apple hard drive, right?
Yes.
And then I asked the guy, how often do these things go bad? I go, what's really the expected lifespan of a hard drive? He goes, 4 years.
Yeah. So basically, it's going to go bad.
Yeah, they all. He says they all go. He's all.
It's inevitable. They all go
he said
bad.
we swap these things out like
I am a backup junkie, and I use Carbonite, and it's awesome. So go ahead and give it a try. If you're a loyal fan of the show, it is your Geary, it is your humble duty to go sign up for Carbonite and send your receipt to contest@thisweekend.com. And I'm guessing we'll get 100 people to do this. That's typically what happens, which means you got a 1 in 100 chance of winning a MacBook Air, which is, of course, the best computer ever built, and probably the reason why HP is folding like donkeys at the poker table. Let's hear the next story.
So, Silicon Valley golden boy Ashton Kutcher on the cover of this month's Details magazine. He also served as the guest editor for an online-only edition of the magazine. It was called The Social Issue, and it profiled some of Kutcher's picks for the hottest, most innovative startups and tech products of the moment.
Yes.
There was some criticism, however, of Kutcher after he did not disclose the fact that he is an investor in many of the companies he chose to highlight. Gawker named over a dozen companies mentioned in the issue in which Kutcher has a financial stake, including Foursquare, Airbnb, and Flipboard. The only mention in the entire article of his involvement with these companies is, quote, Kutcher puts his money where his mouth is, backing many of the companies he champions here. So they sort of did say he's financially involved in some of them. Richard Cleland of the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, was quoted by the New York Times as saying, if you're out there promoting individual products that you have a specific investment in, it needs to be disclosed. So is he, as Gawker described him, a massive whore? Is this crossing some sort of ethical line, or does he get out of giving disclosures because he's not really a journalist?
Listen. He's a celebrity, so when a celebrity is endorsing a product or just talking about a product, it's pretty safe to assume that they're getting paid.
Yes.
Now, something has changed here. He's the first celebrity to go over to investing in startup companies.
Right.
Obviously, you should disclose, but people do understand that he's not mentioning it for no reason. In this case, I saw how they presented it, and the way they presented it was like tired, wired, you know?
Yeah.
Like, here's the old thing, and here's what you're going to do. And it wasn't clear to me if that was him editorializing, like, I think this is where it's going, or he had an investment. And so this all can be solved very simply by saying, and it's a huge endorsement that he put his own money into this stuff. So he should just say, hey, I made $800,000 on the last episode of 2.5 Men, and I invested in these 10 startups. I believe in them that much that I bought the company. You know, like,
Right.
So there's no downside to him. But I tweet all the time about companies I've angel invested in, and I try to say in every tweet that I'm an angel investor, but sometimes I'll just retweet like whatever they tweet.
I agree on Twitter, that's one thing. But when you publish a article,
yes,
you always disclose. You always say, like, by the way, I'm an angel investor in this company.
You know what they say, no good deed goes unpunished. The fact that we have a celebrity like Ashton Kutcher caring about startups enough that he's giving it its attention, we should be totally effing thrilled.
But that's part of the point, too, is, all right, Ashton Kutcher, it's not David Pogue, right? It's Ashton Kutcher.
Right.
So take it for what it is, right? It's a celebrity. What does he really know about these companies, right?
Actually, you know what? If it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago when he showed up to TechCrunch 50, I would say not so much. Today, very savvy guy.
Is he?
He's a pretty savvy guy now. He understands and uses these products. So when I signed up for Foursquare 3 years ago, Mrs. Kutcher and A+K were two of the first people to follow me.
All right.
And I know it's really them because they actually use the products.
They tweet pictures of
them. They tweet pictures of them. It's not like they're like Tom Cruise's. Tom, I told you this last week when we were having brunch. You have to do your own tweet. I did. I told him. He had me over to the house for brunch. We live near each other.
Mav, you guys hang out.
Anyway, we do. And I told him, Tom, tweet your own tweets. Anyway.
Yes, I would. The only thing I'd add is, if you are reading a magazine and it's not a doctor promoting something, it's a celebrity, buyer beware. And maybe Ashton knows something about these, but probably not any more than any other person who's looked at them. I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think the FTC does anything.
Actually, I know for a fact he talks to the founders of these companies on a regular basis, and when you email him, he gets back to you within. He's like Mark Cuban on email.
And
he is into this. He is into it. He wants you to think that he's the kid from the '70s show. Go ahead.
It wasn't as if the companies that he mentioned were fringe outliers. It wasn't like, in the case of Airbnb, it was like the 20th entrant into the marketplace. It was a fraction of the share of Airbnb. These were legitimate choices. So, I have a hard time worrying too much about it for both. They probably were the right, I'll say, tired wired choices. And, the blanket disclaimer, what else do you want? I mean, come on, let's not one of these things.
Yeah. If you're going to do it in a magazine format, I'm going to go with Lon. You have to disclose in the article. You don't want to bury it in the table of contents because people might open up right to the article. You want to open it. You need to have disclosure where consumption is taking place. Tyler, what are your thoughts from Bangladesh?
Jason, it's kind of like passing gas in a yoga class.
Insight from Tyler.
Hold on a second. It's like passing gas, farting, if you will, in a yoga class.
That doesn't rhyme.
No, it doesn't have to rhyme. It has to be
lose the-
insightful because it is an insight. I don't want to defend Tyler's insight. Now, I know that I've been in a yoga class when people fart. Everybody has. And
You have to assume. I mean,
and if you're doing those crazy positions, it is forgivable in a way that you might fart.
downward facing dog.
You're doing downward facing dog, your butt's in the air, spread akimbo, whatever. Something could be released.
Right.
Therefore, what you're saying is, like a yoga practitioner might release gas due to the moves, Ashton Kutcher, because he is in the limelight and doing all the celebrity stuff and mentioning things, at some point he might accidentally expel.
Bingo.
So it's just par for the course is another way of saying it.
Kind of, right.
I don't agree with that
That's
at all.
that's Tyler's way of saying par for the course.
Yeah, it was inevitable that he would try to sell people on Flipboard as the cool new thing.
He has, he has
haven't done a yoga class, Lon.
I've never been to a yoga class, so I have never passed gas in
But you have
I'm proud to say. In my life, yes, once or twice.
He had internal pressure,
And it happened.
and he's in that environment.
Next story.
Let's please, for the love of all things holy, let's move on.
It's like you know what? It's like opening a donut store in a police station. I liked last week since I've done it. Next story.
Online cloud-based note-taking service Evernote announced Thursday that it had acquired Skitch, a
Two of
Mac
my
app for
favorite
taking
products.
screenshots. Me too. And adding quick notes and annotations. The deal was announced at the first ever Evernote conference called the Trunk Show, held in San Francisco. Skitch was an early partner with Evernote and thus far has only been available for Mac users. It was available for $20 in the Mac App Store. It will now be making the jump to other platforms, and it will be free. The news came as Evernote.
After I paid $20 for it.
Right, me too.
And for Evernote.
The news came as Evernote also announced a big update headed to the iPhone and iPad versions of the app, which will add rich text editing, thank God, and other big, long-standing feature requests. So, thoughts? What do you think of this purchase?
I am addicted to Evernote. It is my new delicious. Because I like to save it like Instapaper for reading later.
Yeah.
But I also like to save it as evidence. And so I'll take screenshots of things as evidence of that moment in time with Skitch. That's how I use Skitch. I just save it into my history file.
Yes.
And then I'll look it up later. With Evernote, I do the same thing. So I've been reading about this, like, are we living in a simulation kind of philosophical stuff? I went down this rabbit hole for some reason.
Okay.
You know, like the whole simulated
right.
reality, and are we living in our ancestor simulation right now, and how would we know, and the Matrix, and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And I can't stop reading about it. I'm addicted. And I'm saving every one of the articles I find to Evernote so that if I ever open up my iPad or my iPhone, wherever I am, and it's synced, I got it. I don't have to worry about the internet connection. And I have it saved for all history. I mean, 50 years from now, I'm going to have this stuff. Well, why the hell did I save that? You got anybody else an Evernote user?
Yeah, I'm totally addicted. And it's the sort of thing that, exactly what you're saying. Like, you're working on a project, you need to save some notes on it, but also I keep all my notes, like, here's everything I'm working on today. Yeah. It's perfect for people who are...
It's like a better Google Docs, except it doesn't have a web interface that's as good as Docs for collaborating and stuff.
Right, and that's the rich text editing I'm hoping, because right now it's not great for copying things in and taking them back out. It doesn't play well with other platforms.
Well,
I'm hoping that we're on the way there.
I wish it was, I'm a huge Evernote user. I kind of live in it for a lot of stuff, and I mean, many of the same uses that Jason's describing, other than the are we living in a simulation part. But the thing that it's missing, and I wish it had, and I wish rather than buying Skitch, they would have bought, Instapaper or Read It Later or something else. My God, I wish those two things were the same product, because it seems, so often the stuff that I'm reading later is stuff I want to hang on to literally until later, and I want it indexed and categorized and tagged inside of Evernote.
Do you email your stuff into Evernote? Do you use the email function?
I don't.
I do that now. That I love. So somebody sends me a document, I forward it to my special, I have a special email router at calacanis.com, boop, right in. Or somebody emails me something, or I write something in an email, I forward it there, and then I start editing it as a doc. So sometimes I'll email somebody, I'll be trading emails with somebody, discussing something, I'll make a good email newsletter. Boom, I forward it into Evernote, I start editing the email into the thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's what makes it so useful, is it's so malleable. I mean, you can use it for a bunch of different things.
It's a true platform.
Yeah, it really
Now,
is.
does it overlap and interfere with your Dropbox usage, Paul?
No, for me, not at all. I mean, they're totally complementary. Literally, one ends up sort of filling in all the holes that the other one doesn't have. The thing that it overlaps with is Mendeley. I don't know, people use Mendeley a lot. Does anyone know that one?
What the hell are you talking about? What's Mendeley? Mendeley Bay, the hotel?
No, Mendeley. It's a fabulous service, actually, but it's for taking the stuff that you would capture inside of Evernote and capturing it in a more structured way, right? So rather than just being a grab bag of text that has no idea what it contains, it actually tries to figure out, oh, this is a newspaper article.
Mendeley, Mendeley. I pulled it up on my screen here, Mendeley. So a free reference manager for academic social network.
For everything, like for articles, papers, and everything. And so it has some sense of what it was. So if you ever want to refer to it later, it's not just that thing. It's actually, New York Times, July 20th, blah, 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 blah. So you can be a little bit more organized about stuff. It's fabulous. But my point is that Evernote, needs to have, I would love to have all of these things together. There's where the overlap is for me.
Who's the likely buyer of Evernote?
Oh, God, I wish it was me.
No, not the product. Who's going to buy it as a Microsoft?
I know.
Apple? Google.
EMC.
EMC for storage.
Yeah.
Huh. Those guys is Dropbox ever gonna get bought? I heard that Apple was sniffing around.
Yeah, Dropbox will get acquired. I don't think it'll ever go public, so it has to get acquired.
Microsoft?
Microsoft would be an interesting one because it's more and more being used by the SMBs.
Yes.
Small,
medium-sized businesses for those people playing along at home.
Yes, that's right. I don't see it as a standalone.
What was the sync service that Microsoft bought? It had some Dropbox-like capabilities, and it promptly
1986 Sidekick for DOS. Sidekick for DOS.
Like 2 years ago, a year ago.
Did anybody here use Sidekick for DOS? Anybody remember Sidekick?
No. Yeah, I
Paul, you remember Sidekick?
I remember Sidekick.
It was
before DOS. How's that?
Was it Folder Share? Is that the one?
No, maybe.
File
Folder Share. That was it.
File synchronization technology provider. Folder.
Right. That was Microsoft bought those guys, right?
I think they did.
Yeah, Microsoft bought Folder Share in 2005.
Yeah, and then killed it.
Yes.
So I hope they don't. So that's why I don't want them to buy Dropbox.
Funny little historical point. Evan Williams brought that up when Dropbox launched on stage at TC50.
What, Folder Share?
Yeah. He says, isn't this isn't this like Folder Share for Windows? And they were like, yeah.
Dropbox was one of the companies that
Yes.
launched at TechCrunch.
Correct.
It's another multi-billion-dollar
that's
company.
hilarious.
Correct.
Yeah, I remember Drew. He gave a terrible presentation.
It crashed. They had a technical hiccup.
But I mean, even in the rehearsals, we had to coach him. He was sweating and shaking.
Yes.
Remember?
I totally remember.
The founder of Dropbox. Tyler and I coached him for the first TechCrunch 50. He was TechCrunch 40. He was literally shaking while he read it, and he was reading from us. He said, "Calm down, Drew. Look me in the eyes." I did the same technique I did everybody. Look me in the eyes, and tell me why you built the product.
Yeah.
And then he did, and that was it.
It's a hell of a product.
And it's a really great product. Next story.
Photovine is a photo sharing app built by the team Google acquired along with Slide. The idea seems to be replicating the success of Instagram. The app has been an invitation-only beta for the past month. It's now open to the public, but only in the iTunes store. It's only for your iPhone right now. The interface similar in some ways to Instagram. The focus now is having users group their photos together thematically. So you get kind of a collage of a topic like photos of your cluttered desk or smiling with your mouth closed. So those are the vines in the title. All photos are public. Anyone can check your photos. There's no following. You just go to somebody else's profile and see their photos.
Max Levchin. This is Max Levchin's Slide group.
Right. Oddly for now, the app only available on iPhone, and it integrates with Twitter and Facebook, but not Google+. So it was built by the Slide team, which is not in-house talent, but why would they launch it without integrating it with the basic Google platforms?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I think that when they bought Max Levchin company, Max's company Slide, I think they said to him, we want you to be this crazy incubator, just produce stuff, and if it sticks, we will maybe incorporate some of those features into the social stuff we're doing. But this is why they wanted to buy Path, and this is why they wanted to buy, what was the other social network? Color. They just want to own assets and see what happens and keep those assets away from Facebook and keep that talent away from Facebook. So Max Levchin understood social as good as Mark Zuckerberg or 10 other people. And they just said, we need to have this guy on this team. He wants to make apps. Great. He's sitting in San Francisco, make apps. He made the Disco app, which is like GroupMe. And so for them, it's like, well, we have his company building these things. If any of these things become material, we can promote them on the homepage or put them into that new black toolbar at the top. So you can be sure that as things pop and become good products, they're going to start placing them up there. And they're starting to put things on the homepage now. Aggressive Google has arrived, and they not only are going to do these things because Larry Page wants to change the world, and that's his motivation, they are going to have revenue issues and earnings issues with all the spending. They're going to need some of these things to actually turn into earnings, correct, Paul? At some point, they're going to have to drive revenue?
Oh, sure. But I mean, my biggest issue with Photovine is it's going to interfere with my color usage. Like how am I going to use these two things at once?
Absolutely. And you know what? I think the same thing every time I take out my iPhone. I'm like, color, path, or. I mean,
are you coloring right now?
You know what? Every night I open it up every month and I take a photo. Nothing's changed in it.
No, it's.
They must be deep underground right now, doing the whole product.
I think it may be the most confusing app experience I've ever had. The first time I opened up color.
But here's the thing. Somebody told me, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, to segue from something that sort of, everybody's doing and Google is too, which is the Instagram-like product, can I just ask sort of an orthogonal question? Why hasn't Google bought Yelp yet?
Yeah, well, they offered them a ton of money and they wouldn't take it. I mean, and then Elevation Partners gave them more money, I think they feel like they can replicate their business.
If you want to think about a mobile service that has, a model attached to it and that is, at least in my own usage, rapidly replacing my usage of Google on my cell phone if I'm searching for things, it's Yelp. It's really remarkable to me that they'll bid 60% or 40% up for Motorola, or they'll spelunk around inside of services like Photovine, and no one really beats the hell out of Google for why it has never bid up, truly bid up and said, you know what, this thing just can't continue because it represents a legitimate threat to us on mobile phones.
They should have bought Yelp. They should have closed that deal. And I think that they had a moment in time where their deal people were in a rut, like card dead.
I think that's right. Yeah.
And I think Larry Page is like, you know what? I'm going to get personally involved in this and make sure that these deals get closed, because they couldn't close Groupon, they couldn't close Yelp, they couldn't close Path, they couldn't close Color. They went to all those people and tried to close it, and everybody's like, why would I sell to Google? And I'm thinking, for the money? But no, obviously there's a whole new breed of entrepreneurs and VCs. You tell me if I'm wrong, who are saying, don't sell. This is a moment in time. Keep building. Don't sell. Long-term greed over short-term gain.
Yes, and I think with just like, let's say, LinkedIn, Yelp's been around for about 200 years, right? I mean, it started off just as this nascent little product right after the bubble burst. It kept moving, kept going. Finally, the mobile piece of it started to get a lot of traction. And you have to understand the mentality within Yelp is, we've done it, and there's something really wonderful about seeing your name in the S1, about ringing that bell on NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. Get acquired after that. But I think they want to go public. And so being acquired by, I don't think being acquired by Google today is as bad as being acquired by Microsoft was in the 90s, where you felt like, okay, now we're all going to go die.
Right.
But there is a sense that you got acquired by Google, you're a footnote. You're no longer relevant.
You're no longer making history.
Right.
You're part of the past.
And they understand they can get liquidity.
Well, that is the big difference between now and then, is that it used to be that was the brass ring was getting acquired by Microsoft or whatever, going public as well. But now you will have somebody like DST or Elevation or whoever, Fidelity, or somebody will come down and say, hey, I'll buy those shares off you, or Second Market, any number of people will
Think
buy
about
shares.
Groupon. The founders of Groupon have cashed out $800 million.
Right.
So for them, it would be nice.
Right before the business is about to collapse.
It would be nice from their perspective if we go public, but they're already fabulously wealthy. So the pressure to sell isn't so big.
Right, but fabulously wealthy is not, as a VC, where you want people, is it? You want them to be not worrying about their rent and living in a nice loft, but you still need them hungry.
Genie is out. You can't get him back in. That would have been nice.
So how do you go into a board meeting, and have any leverage over these entrepreneurs anymore?
It's much more difficult. So what you have to do is you have to have someone there who says, I want to be the guy whose company still is relevant to people. That it stands out there. If you don't have that, if you're just there for the money, then the board will collectively say, all right, we should just sell. Your heart's not in it anymore. But I think for a lot of these small companies, still, their heart is in it. As soon as the money becomes more important, then I think you're right. You get in either professional management or you find a nice home for the business. That's what you have to deal with.
Paul, what do you think about...
A year from now, Yelp's part of Google. That's my prediction.
What do you think of Groupon? I mean, you're like one of these economist-type guys. You understand how the money flows. I mentioned Groupon. You start laughing. Why?
Well, I mean, it's a hopeless business that's predicated on this continual inflow of people that drive the support of this sort of negative, this working capital deficit that many people have pointed to, this deficit that's broadening over time, has massive cash consumption, shows no sign of that decelerating, and at the same time is being picked up by all kinds of directions by people who already have audiences and or verticals where they can have halo higher prices and make better margins and not have negative working capital. It's tough to like the model. There's some questionable people attached to it. I mean, I hear from institutional investors who are, very skittish about it for obvious reasons on the, looking at the S1. There isn't much to like here. I mean, I said on, I don't know, it was Bloomberg, I guess it was on Bloomberg TV one day that it seemed like if it ever makes it public, it's a made for central casting, long-term bet all you have short.
So do you think their IPO will get pulled, yes or no?
I don't think it's going to get pulled.
No,
I don't see
they'll make
how
it
that
out.
happens at this point.
And
No,
what is
I mean, assuming nothing goes, the world goes on tilt again or something, nothing external happens. I think they have to go public.
Would the institutions want to own 5-10% of this?
They will find institutions that will, in the same way that third-tier venture capital firms can find institutions. People just say, well, this was my lucky day. I didn't get a hold of, Google, but look, I got Groupon.
Huh, interesting. What do you think?
Well, I think there was a lot that I wanted to believe in about Groupon. When we were back at Idea Lab, we did City Search, right?
Yep.
And what broke the model for City Search was like digital cities for AOL. You had to have feet on the street knocking on the doors of these small business owners, and that was the economic model that collapsed. We couldn't get enough advertising in to support these feet on the street, and that's the only way to get small and medium business people. Well, when I first heard about the growth of Groupon, I thought, wow, they cracked the code. Somehow they figured out to get enough of the economics where they could actually afford to have thousands of people knocking on doors.
If you're selling thousands of Groupons and they're making 10, 20, 30,000 a Groupon,
yes,
then you can afford to have a $100,000 salesperson selling it.
Yes, and so the reason I thought it deserved such a massive valuation at the time was if they have cracked the small and medium business code, then which no VC has done a good job of doing except for the internet advertising businesses, they have created massive value and they'll be able to sell lots more into that market. Right. Well, it appears from their S1 now that they were showing it that, it looks like the math doesn't add up, which is why, as you probably know, in the S1, they created that financial term, which was earnings before expenses, which was basically what it was.
Yeah.
We actually are profitable.
If you take out our biggest cost, we're profitable.
Yeah.
If you add that back, we're hopelessly not.
Right. And here's the cautionary tale here. There's a reason why it's always good for a company to be seasoned for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years before it goes public, from an investor standpoint. And the reason is you get to see if that theory about the business actually plays out, which is why LinkedIn was so well received. It's a 10-year-old business, and they proved they could do something. By the way, it's also why Yelp will be well received. Great management team, great financial
the idea
systems.
being, if it wasn't going to work, it would not have worked by now.
Right. And what's the one thing in the 90s we all remember that we did as VCs? We said, at low scale, Amazon went public with 14 million in revenue. At low scale, we're not profitable, but when we hit scale, we will be. Now the problem with Groupon is it's doing a couple of billion. So it's at scale. And in fact, the more it makes...
If they stopped spending, though, on acquiring all these customers, and they just relied on their 100 million emails and all these accounts that are sitting there, couldn't they rocket to profitability?
Sure, for a very short period of time. But keep in mind, what is the churn, right? And what is the repeat rate there? That's why I'm wary of it.
That 150 million emails or whatever the accounts are dwindles really quick when people start unsubscribing.
We don't know yet, but there's a theory, and I think it's reasonable, that people will tire of these daily deals at some point, just like the flash shopping. At some point, you've had enough. And so, which is why what the investors really want is some time. Give us a few more years, but they don't have it.
Paul?
This is all advantage.
You see that now in some of you see that now in some of Groupon's oldest markets, right? I mean, you want evidence of when you pull back on spending and you try to see what's going to happen. You're beginning to see the deterioration and the drop off in terms. So it's really hard. I mean, the point's spot on that this is a business that needs some seasoning, has had none, and shows all the evidence of needing even more seasoning than we thought it did.
And yet the entrepreneurs were able to suck out 800 million, which that tells you that there's not a lot of discipline in the markets.
Does this mean that the whole idea of getting entrepreneurs paid before the investors get paid might be a trend that will end? Will that end in Web 3.0, whatever the hell we call it?
It will end with the snap of a fingers as soon as the market stops accepting really high valuations.
Will IPOs stop? Are we going to have the IPO window closed, Paul?
Well, you just look at withdrawal data in the last 2 weeks. So I mean, it's already come to a crawl. Whether it stops entirely, I think will depend on whatever comes out next and how it does. But right now, the receptivity is a fraction of what it was in terms of the kind of risks that institutions will take on than it was even a month ago. I mean, it'd be really interesting to see if we see, say, for example, Zynga get pushed a bit, or any of the other higher marquee names.
Zynga's just going to go roaring out, will you?
Of all the companies out there, and I agree with Paul that there's going to be a slowdown, but the IPO window, the really interesting thing I've been waiting for at this IPO window is it opened in March 2010, is my guess. But there were about 6 IPOs of average companies that went out. I think that was the opening. 2010. Yeah. 2010. So you had Meru Networks, you had Sensata, you had there were about 6. I can't remember all of them. But what's the longest IPO window ever? That was September 98 to March 2000. That was the longest open IPO window in modern times.
Right.
This September, we will have hit 18 months. If that window stays open, the thing that's really exciting is still have Twitter, you do have Groupon, you do have Zynga. Facebook and Yelp. This window could stay open for 30 months, which would be fantastic. I don't think, look at PayPal went public in February 2002. Right? When things were awful. Right. A company that is terrifically profitable and interesting, people will buy, which is why I think of all the recent IPOs and all the IPOs to come, even more than Facebook, I think Zynga is the most fascinating.
Because it's massively profitable? You have no stake in Zynga.
I have no stake in Zynga. I wish I did. But look at their S1, 600,000. Next year, 12 million. Next year, 80 million. Next year, 200 million. Now, 150 million per quarter. This is an incredibly interesting business.
I think that's exactly true, though. But I still think that the investors obviously know that the institutions are giving them that message, which is another reason why, they don't have to hurry, but they don't have to wait either. They will pick their moment.
What's going on, Paul, with the stock market? A year from now, will the Nasdaq and the Dow be higher or lower?
Lower.
Really?
Oh yeah. I'm betting accordingly, and so I'm talking my book, but lower. I mean, look what's happening right now. The market's trying to figure out how to price in a potential double-dip recession at the same time as it tries to price in global austerity, and at the same time it tries to price in tighter monetary policies in most of the developing world. All of these things are steadily getting priced in at the exact same time as it looks like we're going to see probably in the fall a fairly major unwinding at the periphery of the EU. You put all those pieces together, it's very difficult to say, let's say we're seeing $70 of earnings on the S&P 500 next year. You put a kind of stagflation multiple on that of like 10 or 12, you're looking at S&P, 850 or something like that. Well, that isn't where we're sitting today.
But the current, now they may be wrong, but the current projections are 100, 105 dollars.
Right, but that's all, at least a quarter old now. If you watch all the earnings estimates as they come in and get revised in the last 3 weeks in the wake of what's happened, and you aggregate them back up again, you're looking at about $80.
Yeah, so I think that the markets will be much higher, personally. And I think that's...
on the basis of what, though? If earnings are coming in...
Profitability. I just have a different outlook than you. I think companies are going to be far more profitable next year in 2011. And I think...
Because they're controlling costs or because earnings are going up?
Earnings are going up, and the earnings are going up because, yes, Europe and the U.S. are not doing well. They're almost irrelevant to investors like me now. I mean, it's all Asia. And we've got economies growing at 8% to 9 to 10%, and with inflation of 5 to 6%, but they're growing very, very fast. It's half the world's population. And so I think going the next 10 years, the U.S. markets are not that important, but the U.S. companies, the S&P, is already 60% of their revenues are already non-U.S., right? By the way, in the case of online gaming, 90% of the revenues in probably 2 or 3 years will be outside, world revenues will be outside of the U.S. So I don't think...
So unemployment in the U.S., it's a bummer, but it doesn't affect Google's stock price.
Yeah, it's less... Google maybe, but there's lots of companies in the S&P that are not driven by the U.S. economy. And
but it isn't about the U.S. economy. I mean, I think that's probably the best known discount factor in the market. The issue that the market's having, obviously, is the slowdown throughout most of Asia on tighter monetary policy in those countries, especially China. The potential for a refragmentation in Europe, which represents around 20% of S&P 500 sales. You just can't discount all of that stuff so quickly. So I'm with you 5 years out. There's no question. That's exactly what we're looking at, is a U.S. market much less dependent on this domestic. But between now and then, there's a major information gap between how things are priced and where profits come from and where they're going to come from over the next 18 months.
Yeah, like I said, I just think the markets will be higher because I think profits will remain. I think having 0%.
What's the fourth quarter going to be like? I mean, we've had such a great run of fourth quarters and companies doing fabulous. Yeah. Amazon's, Microsoft, Google's. Is the fourth quarter going to be boomtown like it's been for the last couple of years, Paul?
Train wreck.
You predict a train wreck. Advertising and Christmas buying, all this stuff is going to go off a cliff.
Yeah, it's going to be very weak. I mean, and you're seeing that now in the Philly Fed numbers that came out last week. You see that in the Baltic Dry Index figures in terms of bulk shipping. I mean, you really have to sort of look past data and rely fundamentally on hope to not see how certainly we're trembling on sort of the edge of a recession right now. Third and fourth quarter, say we sit around 0.2%, 0.5% GDP growth, it'll be in relative terms, it's going to be a very weak third and fourth quarter.
But keep this in mind. We have now consumer installment debt at 1993 levels. I believe in the triumph of people spending money, not saving money.
Right.
I believe that we will see people who've been fighting for 3 years to reduce their debt load. It was at about $1.3 trillion. Now it's about $850 billion. I think people have a lot of credit availability now. The consumer is about 70% of the economy. And I think Q4 is going to be surprisingly good.
At a certain point, there is nowhere to go but up. Or is that
for sure.
Wishful thinking? That is true, right? I mean...
no, and that's the lesson here, is that we're headed towards one way or the other, kind of a reboot of the whole system, in the sense that the debt accumulated over the post-war years is all getting run down again, and you're going to see it all get flattened out, and we'll go right back up again. The same, it'll be a wonderful 20-year expansion ahead of us. The question is whether are we there now, or are we 5 years away?
And it's going to take flushing out all that debt that can't be paid.
Absolutely.
And somebody loses in that, and it's the banks, which is why they're going down in flames.
This is why the banks are going. This is why European banks can't get funding. I mean, it's all the same problem.
And Europe, of course, is much more
structural. But what does this mean for
problems.
technology people and for founders? Doesn't that mean that our industry is going to do just fine? I mean, are people going to stop buying iPads?
Well,
is it that bad?
You're selling to.
No. Yeah. They're going to stop buying PCs. So what it means is what it's always meant in technology. You have, in any given cycle, you have bear markets and bull markets within the tech sector, right?
Yeah.
If you're an enterprise software guy right now selling to financial institutions, you're probably in a bear market, right? If you're selling iPads, you're in a bull market.
Or games.
Yeah, and things are shifting very rapidly to mobile. So I think if you're in the video game a console business, you are in a freaking bear market, right? Your business is dying.
But if you're in casual games...
If you're in casual game, it's going up. Now, there will, net, it should mean that we are overall better. But obviously, the dislocation in the meantime is going to destroy a lot of value in some of those businesses.
And aren't people panicking right now, Paul? It just seems like everybody is just like hitting the sell button at the same time over the summer, while they're in Martha's Vineyard, while they're in the Hamptons, just saying, F it, I just don't like being part of these big swings every day. Get me out.
They love the swings.
Well, I mean, participation in the stock market among retail investors is at among its lowest levels in sort of the modern history of the U.S. capital markets. People can't take it anymore. They can't take the swings. The average investor can't stand the volatility, so they're doing what seems rational to them, they're bailing out. And I think you saw that late today with people just hitting the sell button and saying, screw it. I don't care if I have to recognize losses.
Gold.
I'm out.
How could gold be worth all this? What's the last time anybody bought the gold necklace? I mean, that's out of vogue.
But keep in mind,
what's the value of gold? What am I going to do with gold?
Gold's more about how much people think they hate fiat currencies, and the reality is they'll discover that fiat currencies don't look so bad if you imagine instead a gold-based currency system. But nevertheless, for now, this has less to do with anything to do with direct demand. The World Gold Council had some great numbers out yesterday showing that demand for gold in terms of its usage for jewelry and industrial manufacturing had flatlined and even declined. This is all about.
What does this all do to the venture industry? The venture
currency.
firms raised their money years ago during boom times, or over the last couple of years during boom times. They're going to have this money sitting there to deploy, right?
Well, yeah, but
they're going to be able to make capital calls, yes?
Yeah, no problem with capital calls, because after 10 years in our business, we have learned how to pick investors who aren't going to blow up on you. And keep in mind, during the darkest days of the financial crisis, there were some LPs who did call and say, please don't make a capital call, right?
And you were like, MC Hammer, please.
Yeah.
MC, we need the money.
Right. So, but the whole venture industry was only putting out $12 billion a year at the time, so it didn't matter. It's a tiny business, right? Relative to
yes, bigger than
every other asset class, it's tiny. But so the thing is, though, the velocity of investment recently has been very high. And if you look at it, it's heavily skewed towards late stage deals. So the only way the industry, I personally believe the industry is going to do very well next 10 years, but for the funds that put a ton of money out
at late stages,
they
need these IPOs to go big.
They have to have the IPO market. It's the only way you can get it.
So if the IPO market crashes, if Groupon is a train wreck, flips off
we're heavily.
What are we? Say it, William. Say it.
We're in a bad position if that happens.
You're about to drop an F-bomb. We'll put $10 in there.
I was waiting though.
But I'm clear.
Is that true, Paul? If the Groupon IPO goes and it flips off the rails and is a train wreck, does that derail the whole entire tech industry?
No, but there is one that does.
Alone, but it wouldn't take very many high-profile exits to go off the rails. Groupon and maybe one other high-profile one, and that'd be it. People declare no mess. I mean, because the reality is institutional investors have lost a lot of their patience with the venture capital asset class. So it wouldn't take much for people to say this is a nuisance. I just, I
mean, don't they feel that way when they look at Demand Media, AOL, and Boingo?
Well, but in the grand scheme of things, those are sideshows, right? I will tell you the tent pole that Paul's talking about. The tent pole in the whole industry is Facebook. Right. If Facebook should have something that shows a reduction of its value, if its membership starts to peel off
if it hits peak engagement, like peak oil?
Yes, if that were to happen.
Where all engagement goes down because there's no more engagement left in the world?
It would be so ugly because every single company out there.
That would be the end of days.
Right, is if you look at it, somehow they're linked back to, but look at Facebook at $100 billion valuation. So if Facebook runs into problems, I think the whole industry.
The chances of that happening are zero.
I think the chances are very low. Facebook has so much headroom to go. But by the way, it's G+, right? If there was in fact, when I first started using G+, my sense was this is Facebook 2.0. Facebook's going to have real problems.
Clearly a better Facebook.
Clearly a better Facebook.
On a product basis, yes, we all agree.
So if it seemed to me for a short period of time, I think it's changed a little now, but for a couple of weeks there, it looked like Facebook's valuation was a bit higher than what it should be. Now, what is the scoop on G+? I hear people saying, no, it's not going to hit 100 million by the end of the year. Users, it's novel.
What do you think, Paul? Are you long Google+? I see you on there.
Yeah, I'm on some. Honestly, I played around a bit to see how it would sort of work for me, and I found there's too many services to support. I just can't.
You have overload. You have overload.
Yeah, I got service overload, and so I kind of have to confess I've kind of bailed on it. I mean, I'm still there, but not really there, and so it
I can't believe the engagement it's pushing. Hey, here is a chart of Demand Media and AOL from the beginning of the year. If you invested $1 in Demand Media, you're now down 68% today, and if you invested $1, you're now down 48%. Does that mean you've got $52 left in the AOL investment if you put it 100 in?
Yes, but keep something in mind, right? That going back, call it 100 years, across all markets worldwide, investing in a basket of IPOs over a 2, 3, 4 year period generally has been a losing proposition.
Too much risk.
Yeah, well, and you're not being compensated for that risk.
Right.
So you have to be a stock picker with IPOs.
You have to be on second market. I mean, that's where the IPOs are actually occurring.
That's
right.
The IPO is a
the
year
SEC
before.
argues that, right?
I mean,
that
the pop occurs between 2 years before the real IPO on second market.
nowadays that's the case.
So basically, the rich people, the accredited investors, have figured out a way to block out the consumers. Should consumers be allowed to invest on second market if they don't have a big net worth, Paul?
No, I don't think so. I don't think they should be at all unless the whole structure of the secondary markets were changed to increase the information disclosure requirements, because right now you're trading in the dark and you're trading against people who aren't in the dark.
So rich people
that's
are
a
allowed
recipe
to
for
bet in the
problem.
dark on Facebook, but the poor folks, Paul Kedrosky says, should not be allowed to bet. They should be allowed to go to Vegas and bet on black, but not on Facebook.
No,
Is that what you're saying, Dr. Paul?
I think it's broader than that, though. I mean, I have no problems with institutions trading with each other in dark markets where they can happily screw each other over. I just think this idea, it's this classic slippery slope problem. Is once you allow that, and once you start allowing individuals, where do you stop, and should we care? And at the end of the line is we don't care. We'll just let liability suits settle it. I guess I'm fine with that too. I just think that the precedent we've set in other capital markets is that's not the way we do it.
Yeah, and I agree.
The risk is you just piss everybody off and they just say, screw it, I don't need to be part of this at all.
No one within second market or any of the other institutions want consumers on that thing, because as soon as that happens, the amount of disclosure, as Paul's mentioning, has to go up, and it becomes something the SEC has to scrutinize. By the way, the real second market problem is not individuals coming in there. The real problem is something I've found in the last 90 days, which is Silicon Valley lawyers have been silently putting into all of the stock option agreements an inability for someone who buys a share to be able to sell it without company permission. So you know what? Game
over.
It's almost game over and the VCs aren't even aware of it.
I was talking to Mark Pincus at Zynga, and he was telling me enough of the nonsense. He wants control, and it's at
Zynga, it's at Twitter. This provision's making it in everywhere.
Yeah. He was the first guy. He was really upset.
I
remember when he like 3 years ago, and people started doing this on him. And he was like, "This is getting crazy. It's taking up my whole life."
All right, but let me give you
500 shares, 1,000 shares. He's got to have all these discussions. It's distracting.
It's true, but let me just say this: this is who sells their shares. It's almost always former employees, right? So here's the real problem I have with this:
disgruntled founders. In the case of Twitter?
it could be, but the real problem I have with what they're doing...
I'm assuming that they're disgruntled.
And I'm not a fan of this provision, by the way, is you give somebody shares, or you give them options, they exercise those shares, so they pay for them. They own the stock.
It's their right to do what they want.
They own the stock, and now the companies are saying, yeah, you do own them, but you know what? We're actually going to devalue them a bit, or a lot, by not allowing you to trade for 5 years. Yep. So I think Silicon Valley employees have no clue right now, and they need to be listening.
They're getting squeezed.
Guys, your options have far less value than they used to have, and you're not aware of it.
That's right.
You cannot trade these things anymore after you freaking buy the shares.
Yeah, it's not right. It's not right. It's crazy. Hey, so talking about revenue destruction, value destruction, AOL now trading at 1.3 billion.
I love AOL. I mean,
is this just like buy it and then get all the blogs I sold them for free now? Because the Access business is going to throw off $1.5 billion in the next couple of years?
Well, here's the thing about AOL that I love. All right, I love it. I love all crappy companies at a certain price, right?
Right. You like AOL at 1.3 billion?
I do, because they got $400 million in cash, right? So now you got like a $900 million. All right. Then you've got
$1.5 billion in profits.
Of the $2.4 billion in revenues, $800 million of that is dial-up. And dial-up business is actually pretty profitable, but you take that business and let's say, fine, it's not growing, it's dying. You sell it for 0.5 revenues, maybe 0.3 revenues.
Now it's a $300 million company.
All right.
Now it's worth less than Yelp.
So now you got a $600 million market cap. And by the way, if you believe that what they paid for TechCrunch and what they paid for Huffington Post are accurate valuations, which collectively is about $400 million. So now you've got all the rest of the business generating about $1.3 billion, $1.4 billion in revenue. You're getting that for a couple $100 million, and that's high margin digital businesses. So in my valuation, I think it's a great buy.
For Yahoo.
Or for any investor who wants to go out there and buy it. I think it's a really interesting business.
What about demand now at $7 and a $600 million market cap? It was $2 billion a couple of months ago. What do you think, Paul?
I think I'm in the camp. I like AOL as sort of a distressed asset, but I have a much harder time with demand in here, just because, again, it's an example of a model that is just not clear to me, and where the...
Had a little funny accounting.
Yeah, well, there's that, and just where the long-term annuity stream of revenue is or profits are going to come from on this one is a lot harder for me to see in demand than it is for me in AOL. So I think as a distressed asset, you could see demand considerably lower even if AOL flattens out in you.
Yeah, if you were trying to buy one or the other,
now
I
this
agree.
kind of activity in a market, companies with real revenues that are start trading below their actual value, let's say, or reasonable value, or substantially. That means a bottoming of the market and M&A activity, correct, Paul? Is that what those are classic signs?
Oh, no question. I mean, all of these guys, I think you're going to see consolidation across all of these neglected, abandoned companies that looked like tech companies. People discovered they kind of weren't, or they stopped being tech companies. They got revalued. They lost their constituency of growth investors, picked up value investors. The value investors start kicking management in the head saying, get my share price up, whether you're going to do a share price buyback or find me a buyer, but the effect is the same. It puts a floor under the price and you find a new owner.
So we're bouncing along the bottom in terms of the economy and the stock market in a way.
This is another example of what I mentioned before, which is the bear and the bull markets going on simultaneously. Right. Here you have this digital company, AOL, which is kind of considered old. By the way, at one point it was worth $200 billion. And now it's being cast aside as an albatross. And who would buy it? I think there's one guy out there would be so excited going into an election year to own Huffington Post, and that would be Rupert Murdoch. I think just owning that asset would excite the heck out of him.
Right after he bought MySpace and then shed it. I don't think he's taken another bite of the apple.
I think Huffington Post is a different business, and I could see them buying it.
All right, this has been amazing. We just went crazy, and we're way over. Oh, wow. Yes, we're in hour 10. We're not going to even do the lightning round. This has been an amazing program when you have two brilliant guys on the program like Tyler and Lon. They really pick up the slack for guys like William.
I got so much to say about the second market.
I think Tyler and Lon are just like, wow. These two guys are smart.
I'm taking notes.
I am. I love having these guys on. Hey, everybody follow Dr. Paul Kedrosky at P. Kedrosky. I'm pronouncing it correct, right? Kedrosky?
Yeah.
And Paul, you're affiliated with the Kauffman Foundation, I think, right?
I am.
Yep.
That's one of my many hats. Is I help those for the.
And I just disclose I was a Kauffman fellow. So
What is this Kauffman Fellow? Is that like Skull and Bones or something?
It's kind of like that.
It's a Yale thing. It's kind of a Yale thing.
So what does that mean? They give you all the money for saying what you say on the news?
We basically
to keep the market going in whatever direction.
No, it's a foundation that's got like a couple of billion in assets, and I basically sort of weigh in on the investment side of things.
Oh, I see. So they have all this money.
Ewing Marion Kauffman founded a company called Marion Merrill Dow, or merged with Dow Pharmaceuticals.
Marion Labs, yeah.
And created this wonderful foundation after he died to help entrepreneurs, basically. And the Kauffman Fellows mantra is building self-sustaining communities. So he was a guy
That's what I do.
He was a guy who in the 1950s from like Hungary tried to raise venture capital, if you can imagine that.
Wow.
And he was not treated well. And so he always remembered that. So he's a real fan of entrepreneurs.
Huh.
And this foundation was built around his estate whenever he died. So it's a pretty remarkable thing.
That's awesome.
He gave the Kansas City, what was it? The Kansas City
Royals.
Yeah, to the city of Kansas City.
Yep.
Wow.
That's right.
Hey, everybody follow Quigley Report on Twitter. Follow Lons on Twitter. Everybody go check out ranker.com to rank the things that are important in your life. Tyler Crowley in Bangladesh. I'm assuming you're on a tour for Squeal in Bangladesh.
But I'm going to be heading back to the LA Startup Weekend this weekend.
Oh, you'll be back in time for the LA Startup Weekend tonight?
Which is actually funded by the Kauffman Foundation.
Oh, Kauffman Foundation, very nice.
On his G6.
On his G6.
Which he will jump out of.
Which he will jump out of.
Yeah.
If you see a G6 fly by the Santa Monica Pier and he lands on the hey, thank you, MailChimp. Thank you, MailChimp. And thank you, Carbonite. Carbonite. They do it so right. It's a delight. $229 a year, and you're going to win that MacBook Air. I can feel it. Go ahead and sign up. Email contest at thisweekend.com. We'll see you all next time. Having fun with the program is like makes it easy.
I never liked
you guys had a good experience. I like that disagreement around the market. I understand. Well, I understand Paul thinks it's going to be lower because of all those things, but I understand what you're saying, which is, God, these companies are already so low. Their earnings are still growing. They're powerful. They're not spending more money. So
you never know, right? That's what makes the market fun. And by the way, I never like to crap on startups. Even Groupon. I want them to do well.
Right. We all do.
Well, God forbid if they go out and they sink by 50%.
Like a roster with a lot of dread. Money's piling up like the Washington Monument. The way I'm steering this track, it'll make you car sick. The only time you're gonna see green is when you barfing. I'm the Mothman, consider this the prophecy. I'm in it to win it, that's why I'm making a profit, see. And I won't spend it till my rich is stupendous. And I'm selling sicker than tech, cause the method is to keep it independent. Money is the root of all evil. But funny how it feeds my people. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money and defeat you. Yeah, money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah, we ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money and defeat you.